Chapter 197 Preparation on the other end. Zhouing didn't think much and bumped into Dr. Luo roughly when the horse galloped away. They were having a rough time in the carriage. When they finally stabilized, Zhouing lifted the curtain and was about to scold Fang Qing, but she saw him trying to stabilize the carriage in a hurry. She was stunned and asked, "Fang Qing, what's going on?" "Mistress, I don't know which wicked fella threw a stone at the horses, but it scared the horse," Fang Qing shouted while he was busy. Zhouing was shocked. Although she didn't know what was wrong, she knew something wasn't right. This was because even if someone accidentally threw a stone at the horse would not be this frightened. The only explanation was that the person had deliberately hurled the rock hard. At the thought of this, she immediately thought of Gu Chengrui being hunted down a few days ago. Could it be that someone tricked her into coming out? "Fang Qing, when the horse stops, turn around and head back," she commanded. "Miss Zhou, what's the meaning of this? Why aren't you going to save Chengrui?" Dr. Luo turned his head and asked in astonishment. Zhouing hesitated for a while but still told him her guess. "Grandpa Luo, this trip is too dangerous. I will bring Chengrui back myself." Dr. Luo's heart ached when he heard this. "There's no need. Since we're here, there's no reason to go back. Let's go together." "But, no buts. It's not safe for me to get off now anyway." Zhouing saw the determination in his eyes, so she no longer refused. She took out a small box from under the seat, and inside it was the self-defense stuff she had prepared before in case of an accident. She didn't anticipate actually using it one day. She then took out 2 paper bags, one big and one small, and handed them to Dr. Luo. "The big one is a tear-inducing powder, and the small one is a knockout powder. I have more of them, and it's more important to protect ourselves." After saying that, she also passed 2 bags to Fang Qing and handed him a dagger. "If there's anything, just yell. You don't have to save the chili powder. We have more." "Understood, mistress. Don't worry," Fang Qing assured her after taking it. To be honest, after listening to her analysis, he was more excited than afraid. First, he could test his strength, and second, he could protect his mistress in return for her care. Most importantly, he may even become a dependable aid to her. As for Zhouing herself, she took out a small, exquisite crossbow and a boning knife, which were placed at the bottom of the box. At the same time, she smeared some knockout powder on them. She put 2 packets of chili powder in her pocket. Chapter 198 Subduing them. The man was shocked. He somersaulted in the air and dropped the rope to land on the ground. However, the moment he landed, the packet of the tear-inducing powder in Fang Qing's hand was flung and smashed into his head. Although he closed his eyes in time, the spicy powder still made him sneeze. At the same time, he cursed, "Despicable. Rich coming from you guys." Fang Qing didn't waste any more words with him after that, because he knew from that short exchange that he wasn't his opponent's match. He had to strike first. So, taking advantage of his attacker's inconvenience, he took out a dagger and stabbed him. The man's ears twitched, and he immediately blocked it with his knife. However, the chili powder made him unable to open his eyes. Seeing this, Fang Qing was secretly happy. It seemed that the boss tear-inducing powder was effective. Thinking of this, he lightened his steps and began to fight with him. It didn't take long for 3 cuts to appear on the man's body, one of which was on his knife-holding hand. The attacker was quickly subdued and knocked out. On the other side, another man kicked the cart's roof off, then slid over. Dr. Luo was shocked and immediately turned sideways to avoid the attacker's foot. When he came down from his rope, Dr. Luo nimbly threw out a handful of chili powder. Unfortunately, Dr. Luo only threw it onto the other party's stomach. It had no effect, and he choked on it instead. Zhouing was prepared. She blocked his kick with a cushion and dodged. At the same time, she took out her crossbow and shot it at the man's chest. The man in black was shocked by the sudden turn and quickly spun around the rope. However, the arrow still hit his arm. He had no choice but to fall from the rope and rush directly at Zhouing. Zhouing feared Dr. Luo getting hurt, so she dodged with a front somersault and landed on the ground. She turned around and aimed the crossbow at the man in black. The man in black seemed to have sensed her intentions and quickly raised his knife to attack Dr. Luo. Zhouing didn't hesitate and shot at the man's hand that was holding the knife. Seeing this, the man had to dodge. He jumped off the carriage, somersaulted forward, and assailed Zhou. Zhou saw this and smiled sweetly. She threw the tear powder between them and shot it with a crossbow. At the same time, she turned around and ran. As expected, there was a scream from behind, followed by a series of sneezes, but soon there was silence. Zhou turned her head and looked at the motionless man on the ground. She used her crossbow to prod him twice, cautiously. After making sure that there was no movement, she said, as expected, "The faster you move, the faster the medicine will take effect." However, just in case, she still pulled down the curtain, tore it into 4, and tied his hands and feet up like a pig. At this moment, Feng Qing came over with another prisoner and asked, "Mistress, what should we do with the 2 of them?" "What do we do?" Zhou paused for a moment and turned her head to look at Dr. Luo, who had finally recovered. "Grandpa Luo, please give them some medicine to sleep for a day." "You brat, you didn't even remind me. You're killing me here." After Dr. Luo finished speaking, he sneezed again and walked over with a bag of knockout powder. Looking at the eyes and nose of the men in black, swollen red by the spiciness, Dr. Luo smiled sinisterly and said, "Ha, Zhou, can you give me 2 bags of tear gas powder for self-protection? This thing is quite useful." "No problem. I can even give you a sack." Zhou nodded. "This is more like it." Dr. Luo stepped forward, pinched the black man's chin, and poured a small pinch of knockout powder into his mouth. He gave some to the other and said, "All right, they'll leave the rest to you guys." Chapter 199. Someone saved them? Zhou looked at the 2 people on the ground with a troubled expression. With others around, she couldn't kill them and put them into her inner space to be used as fertilizer. However, she was unwilling to let them go. At this moment, a small bee flew past her, and her eyes lit up. She told Feng Qing, "Comb the 2 of them and see if there's any identification. Of course, if there's money on them, help yourself." "I understand. Don't worry, mistress." Feng Qing's eyes brightened, and he immediately went to work. Zhou turned around and found the small box that contained the chili powder. She wrapped a small bag of white sugar from her inner space in the small box as a cover. "Mistress, there's about 4 taels of broken silver and silver notes worth around 90 taels. Feng Qing summarized and handed the silver to her. 90 taels? Zhou took it and pondered. The people who chased after Gu Chungrui last time also seemed to have 90 taels of silver on them. In addition to the broken silver pieces, it was a total of 50 taels of silver per person. They should be the same group of people and sent by the same person. Otherwise, how could the amount of silver they had on them be so similar? "Do they have any marks on their bodies?" he asked. No, both of them were clean. There wasn't even a mark on their knives. "It seems that the other party is cautious," Zhou concluded and took out 30 silver. She handed them to Feng Qing and said, "You've worked hard. Take this." "No need, mistress." Take it. You're not young anymore. Keep it for your future wife." After Zhou finished speaking, she stuffed the banknote into his hand. The 2 used their attacker's rope to tie the 2 men to a tree. Finally, Zhou asked Feng Qing to go to the river, wet the sugar with it, and smear it on the faces and hands of the 2 men in black. After that, she turned her head and saw Dr. Luo squatting in front of the horse, examining it. Zhou walked over and asked, "Grandpa Luo, how's the horse? Can it be saved?" Dr. Luo shook his head and said with a grave expression, "Their archery skills are good. 1 arrow pierced the horse's windpipe, so you'd be more careful in the future." "Thank you for your advice, Grandpa Luo. This was found on their bodies. Take it as my apology." Zhou said this while pulling out 3 10-tael silver notes and handing them to him. Dr. Luo raised his head and refused. "There's no need. If you really want to help me, prepare a table of wine and food for tonight. I need to have a good drink." "All right then, it's a deal. We shouldn't stay here for long. Let's hurry up and leave." Zhou reminded them and picked up her small box. She put away all their weapons, picked up the 2 attackers' knives, and walked toward Huan village. However, they did not walk far before they saw Gu Chungrui sitting in the ox cart and the coachman talking and laughing. The three finally heaved a sigh of relief. When Gu Chungrui saw the three of them, especially the bloodstains on Fang Qing's body, he was worried. "What happened to you?" he asked. Zhou did not hide anything and told him what had happened today. "It seems like they won't stop until they die." Gu Chungrui gritted his teeth and cursed. "Get in the cart. We'll make a big deal out of this and send them to the county government," Gu Chungrui decided. After he finished speaking, he stepped onto the ox cart first. Zhou Ying and the other two immediately followed, but when they returned to the small forest, there was no one. Even the broken carriage and the horse's body were gone. Did someone save them? Fang Qing paused for a moment, then immediately searched around. He knew that they would only wake up after 24 hours if no one came to save them. Chapter 200 Verification. As expected, the rope above had been cut off at waist height. He ran back in a panic and asked, "Mistress, I think they were rescued. Don't tell me they have helpers?" Dr. Luo cried out in alarm. Gu Chungrui and Zhou looked at each other and had a rough idea of what was happening. If the other party's people had saved them, there was no need to clean up the scene so thoroughly. In that case, it could only be someone on their side. Thinking of the news that Sun Hongliang had revealed, the couple smiled. This saved them a lot of trouble. After that, they took the ox cart and returned to town safely. When they parted, Zhou gave Gu Chungrui the money she had found today to buy another carriage and then returned to the restaurant. When Sun Hongliang saw Zhou Ying and Fang Qing return, he heaved a huge sigh of relief. "Mistress, you're back. Is Dr. Gu all right?" "He's fine and doing well." After Zhou said this, she diverted Fang Qing to the back kitchen. She walked to Sun Hongliang and asked, "Do you still remember what the person who sent you the message looked like? I'm ashamed to say this, but my negligence caused you to suffer." Sun Hongliang apologized and told her what happened after they left. At the same time, he also revealed to her that when they went out, there would be people protecting them in the dark. With her thoughts confirmed, Zhou heaved a sigh of relief and replied, "I don't blame you for this. You were just as concerned and confused, too. I mean, I didn't react in time either. But we have to be more careful in the future. Fortunately, we prepared some self-defense items in the carriage beforehand. Otherwise, we really wouldn't have been able to come back today. Yes, I will find the messenger as soon as possible. It's best if you don't go out for the time being." "I will remind Chungrui." Zhou nodded and told him a total of 180 silvers, about 50 silver taels from each assassin, and then turned back to the kitchen. However, even if she did not punish Sun Hongliang, it did not mean that he would not be punished. She had just returned home that night when Manager Liu summoned Sun Hongliang over. Sun Hongliang looked at Manager Liu's serious expression and immediately understood what was happening. He knelt on one knee and apologized. "Captain Liu, please punish me for my negligence. You still have the nerve to ask for punishment?" If they hadn't prepared in advance today, Zhou Ying and the other two would have died in that forest. How would we explain this to General Zhou? Manager Liu scolded angrily. "What have you learned all these years?" He pointed at Sun Hongliang's nose and scolded. "You can't even tell if the person is problematic or not? It's a small oversight. Please punish me, Captain." Sun Hongliang lowered his head in defeat. "Go back and write down your punishment 100 times. If it weren't for the fact that they can't do without you, I would have sent you back to the base and trained you for a month." Manager Liu waved his hand.
Yes.
Sun Hongliang thought of the messenger and told him the truth. "I feel that this person is not simple and must be investigated as soon as possible." In addition, Zhou told me a piece of news today. She said that whether it was the people who hunted her today or those who hunted Gu Chungrui a few days ago, each had about 50 taels of silver on them. 50 taels of silver? Shopkeeper Liu immediately understood what was going on. This was most likely the reward for their mission, which meant that these people were from other places. It seemed that Xiao Lansheng's backer had emerged, as General Zhou had said. "Is there a mark on the banknote?" he asked. Chapter 201 Fallout. "No, it's just normal silver notes from the Baodong Bank," Sun Hongliang said. "I see. It seems like our real opponent is here." When Manager Liu said this, he thought of the two people his subordinates had brought back in their interrogation. However, the results were disappointing. They could only tell from their accent that they were from the capital and nothing else. He had no choice but to use the two of them as bait. Wang Quan had suffered setback after setback, and knowing that he couldn't hide anymore, he reported to Qiao Lansheng. Qiao Lansheng was so angry that he choked Wang Quan's neck and said through gritted teeth, "You fool, those 10 people are death warriors. Do you know what that means? If they were alive, they would have crawled back no matter what. Since there's no news, it means they're dead. You're stupid enough to send 2 more even knowing that. Why don't you die from your stupidity?" Arga. Wang Quan's eyes rolled back, and his hands clutched Qiao Lansheng's hands tightly, struggling desperately to get him to let go. However, the enraged Qiao Lansheng didn't stop. He knew very well that if this got out, he would be punished too. Just as Wang Quan was about to be strangled to death, he started struggling physically, kicking and hitting him. Although he couldn't use much strength, Qiao Lansheng regained his senses and threw him aside. He knew it was not the right time for him to show his face, and he did not have any more trustworthy subordinates. There were many things that Wang Quan needed to take care of. After being thrown to the ground, Wang Quan began to take big breaths before slowly recovering. However, after recovering, he realized that his throat was so painful that he struggled to swallow. He crawled and stood up, walking to Qiao Lansheng and pointing to his throat. Qiao Lansheng looked at the bruised handprint on Wang Quan's neck and narrowed his eyes. "Go to my private account and take some money to find a doctor. In addition, stop all operations for the time being and wait for my next order." Wang Quan nodded and bowed, turned around, and walked out. Qiao Lansheng looked at his back with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. It was no wonder that he was able to ruin the business of Dongxin Restaurant in the past with his meager abilities. Qiao Lansheng had to cultivate a few more trustworthy people as soon as possible, or he would get into trouble sooner or later. Although Wang Quan didn't know that Qiao Lansheng intended to kill him, he knew that after this incident, his young master would no longer put him in an important position, and he was prepared to prepare a way out. After this incident, Zhou and her husband were more well-prepared every time they went out, especially Gu Chengrui. They tried to reduce the chances of going out as much as possible. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days had passed. The days were peaceful, but the two did not relax. Instead, they became more and more vigilant. At night, they tied Zhuang up and set up some traps in the courtyard. However, the couple was getting busier because everyone began to plant chili seedlings. At the same time, Zhou also took out rapeseed and lettuce for everyone to produce. Of course, she also requested that what they grew to be sold to Grassland Taste Restaurant. After the Qingming festival, the work in the field was almost done. That night, just as Gu Chengrui and his wife were about to start dinner, second Uncle Gu and Gu Chengxi came looking for them. Seeing that there were only stir-fried green bean sprouts and chives scrambled eggs on the table, second Uncle Gu was stunned and exclaimed, "Your restaurant's business is so good, and you are only having this for dinner? It's not that bad. Have you guys eaten? If not, let's eat together." Gu Chengrui greeted them. "You two hurry up and eat as we've already eaten." Second Uncle Gu shook his head and said, Chapter 202, a way out, alright? Then you guys can sit and wait. Gu Chengrui wasn't overly polite. He went to the west room to get a plate of stir-fried pumpkin seeds and handed it to them. "Have some snacks as you wait." After that, he turned around and had dinner. After Zhou finished eating, she poured a glass of water for the father and son. Once Gu Chengrui finished too, he asked, "Second uncle, why did you bring Chengxi here today?" "Right, Chengxi said that he wants to study medicine. I thought that this was also a way out for him. We can't let him just be a store assistant, so I came to see if you could take him as a disciple." Second Uncle Gu put down the pumpkin seeds and asked with a serious expression. Of course, this also left a way out for himself. He realized that his eldest son had secretly bought 2 acres of land to grow vegetables, and they had never told him. In fact, if he had not discovered it, they might have kept it a secret forever. If his eldest son were unfilial, he would have to turn to his youngest son and need someone to take care of him in his old age. This was why he couldn't stand by and watch Chengxi stay home and work on something unimportant to his future. Gu Chengrui looked at Gu Chengxi and asked, "Chengxi, do you really want to learn medicine?" I want to learn. Not only can I earn money by practicing medicine, but I can also save lives and earn respect. Gu Chengxi nodded. You're quite realistic and understand your goal. Gu Chengrui nodded in agreement, then said, how about this? You go to the clinic and be an apprentice for 3 months. They'll also observe if you have talent in this area. If you do, then continue to study. If you don't, you will have to change your profession. He paused briefly and asked, what do you guys think? This arrangement is best. I will leave him to you. Second Uncle Gu expressed his delight. I'll listen to you, third brother. Gu Chengxi nodded repeatedly. All right, come over early tomorrow morning, and we'll go together, Gu Chengrui added. After that, they chatted for a bit, and Zhouing and her husband knew the Gu family had finished their farm work prep. Father Gu and Second Uncle Gu were planning to rent a boat to start a river transportation business. Their snack shop in the town had stabilized and was handed over to Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao to manage. Gu Chengrui hesitated for a moment before reminding them, you better be careful. Elder Qiao's son, Qiao Lansheng, is still alive. He might make a move on you. What? Didn't the Qiao family get exiled? Second Uncle Gu exclaimed in shock. He's back, and we were both attacked. Fortunately, we brought something for self-defense, so we survived. You guys should be careful. Are you hurt? Second Uncle Gu asked as he sized them up. No, we were afraid of being robbed, so we always had something for self-defense. That's how we managed to survive their assassination attempt. Gu Chengrui explained. But didn't Zhou Huaiming do everything to stamp out the Qiao family? How could they make such a big mistake? I think you know the current situation in the court better than I do. Second Uncle Gu did not speak after hearing this. The emperor had a total of 6 children, and 4 of them had already grown up. In addition to the emperor's distrustful personality, although the court seemed harmonious on the surface, undercurrents surged while his children fought for power. It was especially fierce between the eldest prince and the 4th prince. One was the legitimate heir, while the other was the son of the emperor's most favored consort. The 2 sides were almost at each other's throats at this point. The Gu family was a sacrifice in this political struggle. They had to be very, very careful when it came to their new river transportation business. Otherwise, they would be reduced to the streets if something happened again. Chapter 203 Water Wheel. After that, Second Uncle Gu wasn't in the mood to chat anymore. So, after exchanging a few polite greetings, he brought Gu Chengxi home. But just as he left, he returned and said, oh, I almost forgot. There's still something I want to discuss with you. Do say, Gu Chengrui replied. Right, I heard that you drew the water wheel. You see, we were wondering if we could help you sell it. At that time, our 2 families and the Qin family will share the profits. What do you think? The water wheel is done? Zhouing asked happily. The wheat in the manor was waiting to be watered, and she was getting impatient. It's done. We tried to install it today, and the water test will probably take place the day after tomorrow. The chief will definitely inform you by then. That's great. It'll be much easier with the water wheel. Indeed. Otherwise, it would be too time-consuming and laborious to fetch water from the river bit by bit. Thanks for creating that quickly. Gu Chengrui smiled as he spoke. He then looked at Zhouing and asked, do we still have to get involved in the water wheel? Zhouing shook her head. No, we don't know any carpentry and don't have time to run a business. We won't get involved. Just give us a water wheel will do. She didn't want to have any business dealings with the old family. Otherwise, there would be pointless arguments in the future. Gu Chengrui nodded in agreement. This is also what I want. So, second uncle, if you want to start a water wheel business, I suggest you look for the patriarch, the village chief, and the Tian family to discuss. In addition, this water wheel is something that benefits the country and the people. I believe it will not be long before word gets out, and the officials may intervene. Second Uncle Gu nodded and asked, this water wheel can be sold at a high price in areas with little rain. Are you really going to give it up? Yes, as long as we can get what we need. Gu Chengrui nodded. I'll release this news then. No problem. Remember to get us a water wheel. I know. Second Uncle Gu responded and went out with Gu Chengxi. The next night, the patriarch and the village chief weren't sure of what they heard, so they came to confirm it again. After knowing that the couple really only wanted a water wheel, they turned and left. After a whole day of hard work, they finally managed to draw water from the river on the third day. The villagers were delighted and didn't have to worry about watering the land this year. The next step was to dig a canal, and the land in the village would be irrigated. 5 days later, the second water wheel was created. Zhouing asked them to send it to the manor, making Changshan and the others jump in joy. In less than half a month, orders for the water wheel mobilized the labor force of the entire village. One day, Zhouing had just entered her restaurant when she saw manager Lu waiting inside. She was stunned for a moment before walking over and asking, "Uncle Lu, what brings you here today?" "General Zhou is waiting for you in the bamboo garden on the second floor," Manager Lu stated as he rose to his feet. "Since General Zhou is here, let's go up together." Zhouing offered and went upstairs with him. After pushing the door open, she saw Zhou Huaiming eating and drinking tea with a look of enjoyment on his face. She went forward and said, "Hello, Brother Zhou. Have a seat." "Has Brother Gu already left for the clinic?" "Yes, he went there early in the morning. The temperature difference between day and night is quite drastic now, and many people have caught colds. The clinic sure is busy. You guys sit down while I call him over," Zhouing said and was about to go out. "Forget it. There's nothing that important for him to come over at this time. Don't call for him." Zhou Huaiming quickly stopped her. Chapter 204, Looking for the Blueprint. "What's the matter?" Zhouing asked as she sat opposite him. Manager Lu, on the other hand, walked to Zhou Huaiming and poured a cup of tea for each of them before sitting down. "There are two main things. First, I just missed your cooking and want to come over to satisfy my craving, but I don't want to have hot pot this time. The other thing is about the water wheel. The north of the Ming dynasty is short of water, so I hope you can sell the drawings to me. You can name a price," Zhou Huaiming stated. Zhouing shook her head with a smile and said, "I'm not selling the blueprint, as this is a good thing for the country and the people. If you can use it well, feel free to take it. But there is one thing, you have to leave some water wheels for us. The whole village is working overtime, and I don't want them to work for nothing." Zhou Huaiming gave her a thumbs up and said, "Such selflessness, then this matter is settled. They'll see if I can get you some rewards later. As for the water wheel in your village, they're selling it too expensively. They'll discuss it with them, and I won't ask them to sell at a loss." "All right, do as you see fit." Zhouing didn't say anything more after hearing that. After asking them to rest, she went to the kitchen to work. First, she made the base sauce and dipping sauce for the hot pot and began to prepare some dishes. As there were just a few people, she prepared 6 dishes and a soup. They were 4-flavor meatballs, braised pork with pickled vegetables, stew beef, cumin mutton, stir-fried shiitake mushrooms with vegetables, bean sprouts and vinegar sauce, and fishball soup. While preparing the dishes, Manager Lu reported to General Zhou what had happened recently. Zhou Huaiming nodded. "I didn't expect them to know how to protect themselves. I'm relieved." Manager Lu added, "The key is that they have a variety of things in their hands." Putting the knockout powder out of the equation, who would have thought they would make chili and mustard powder into weapons? Surprisingly, the effect was quite good too. One of them almost went blind from that. If our people didn't go in time, those 2 attackers would have either frozen to death or been stung to death by bees at night. No matter how we interrogated or tortured them, they didn't speak. But what's funny is that the sugar on their wounds attracted ants, and the attackers spilled everything they knew. Manager Lu burst out laughing. "Doesn't this also provide us with a means of interrogation?" With a smile, Zhou Huaiming stated, "Since you're almost done with the investigation, let's wrap things up. Otherwise, ITLL threaten the couple if we continue this. They're already on guard, so the next time the attackers strike, ITLL be much more brutal than the previous 2 times." "All right, we'll make arrangements. It's fine. We'll go after dinner. Otherwise, it's boring for me to have lunch alone." "All right, it seems that I'm in for a treat today." After the food was served, the 2 ate to their heart's content and then went off to do their tasks. They agreed to go together in the evening to get the blueprints. On the other hand, Qiao Lanqing had also found the source of the blueprint. He had initially planned to get someone to steal it, but changed his mind when he received the news that Zhou Huaiming had gone to Grassland Taste Restaurant. At night, he immediately reported the matter to his superior. "Young master, I heard Zhou Huaiming didn't bring many people with him this time. Why don't we? We can know their limit then. You've forgotten about the 4 people we lost. Although assassinations would vent our anger, it's the stupidest method. Don't forget that many of their people are already stationed here. What you need to do now is find everyone and capture them all in one fell swoop. Do you understand?" Chapter 205 Escape I. As Qiao Lanqing said this, the sound of fighting suddenly came from outside. The two looked at each other and quickly looked out the window. They saw Zhou Huaiming rushing in with several times more people than their men. In just a short while, more than half of their men were killed. When the young master saw this, he was so angry that he wanted to give Qiao Lanqing a hard slap. It seemed like an inexperienced person couldn't be put in an important position, no matter how smart they were. However, he knew that now was not the time to be angry. He immediately pushed the bookcase aside, opened a 5-foot-tall, half-meter-wide sliding door, and quickly jumped in. Qiao Lanqing immediately chased after him. The young master, who was about to close the door, hesitated for a moment before letting him in. He then closed the door and said, "Remember, your sister is still in my hands." After he finished speaking, he turned around and ran into the tunnel. Qiao Lanqing was stunned for a moment, but he quickly understood what he meant. He was warning her not to sell him out if he was caught, or he would not be able to protect his sister, Qiao Lanlan. To be honest, he was only using Qiao Lanlan. If it weren't for her, the Qiao family wouldn't have fallen from grace and turned him into a stray dog. Just as he was in a daze, he heard footsteps coming from outside. He quickly headed down the tunnel and chased after the young master. Zhou Huaiming came in and was surprised to see the empty house. "Search. There's an 80% chance of a tunnel in this house. But be careful."
Yes.
Everyone responded and immediately got to work, soon finding the entrance to the tunnel. "Cover your face and bring a torch in," Zhou Huaiming cautioned. "Remember to be careful." Afterwards, the person standing at the tunnel entrance immediately covered his face and rushed in with a torch. 4 more people went down after him. Seeing this, Zhou Huaiming walked to the bookcase and began to flip through the books, trying to see if there was anything of value left behind. He only found 5 accounting books, but many things were recorded in them. He could read the words on them as they weren't encrypted, and he immediately sent more people to raid the house. 2 of his men returned from the tunnel not long after, but they only had Qiao Lanqing in their hands. The other 3 continued after the young master. Zhou Huaiming stepped forward and grabbed Qiao Lanqing's chin to force him to look up. He smiled and said, "Oh, you were abandoned by Su Mingtang, the 7th heir of the Su family?" Qiao Lanqing was shocked. He had never thought that Zhou Huaiming would know who his master was. However, the shock was only momentary and was quickly covered up. Unfortunately, Zhou Huaiming had been staring at him intently. He was used to interrogating all kinds of criminals, so Qiao Lanqing's surprise confirmed his guess. However, it was impossible to arrest him without sufficient evidence, so he asked again, "Tell me, where did he run off to? Or does he have a place to stay?" "I don't know," Qiao Lanqing immediately replied. He really didn't know. He hadn't been with his master for a long time, and had only just gained his young master's trust before the Qiao family's incident. Otherwise, the Qiao family wouldn't have ended up in such a state. "Are you sure? I don't think a weak scholar like you can withstand the infamous 18 tortures in prison." "I really don't know." "Then tell me what you know." Qiao Lanqing didn't reply and didn't pay him any more attention. There were so many of the young master's people here, and he didn't believe the young master would abandon him. "Take him away. Remember to interrogate him properly," Zhou Huaiming ordered. He continued searching the house. After confirming that there was no further evidence, he gave up. It seemed that this 7th young master was really cunning. Chapter 206 Arresting them. After another 15 minutes, the 3 men walked out and said, "General, we couldn't find that person's whereabouts. Where does the tunnel lead to?" "It's a dry well about 1 mile away from the house." "Then expand the scope of the search." That person is the seventh son of the Su family, Su Mingtang. Understood. The three men responded and went out to look for him with more men. Meanwhile, Zhou Huaiming brought Xiao Lanqing back to his manor and locked him in the dungeon for interrogation. Unfortunately, Xiao Lanqing was quite stubborn and did not say anything. Finally, he had to employ the method discovered by Manager Liu. He applied some sugar to Xiao Lanqing's wound and threw him onto the grass. Sure enough, his wound was covered with ants after a short while, and he couldn't get rid of them no matter how he struggled. Xiao Lanqing tasted the real feeling of being bitten by 1,000 ants. A few times, he wanted to bite his tongue to commit suicide, but he couldn't as he was fed a muscle relaxant. Just as he felt like he was about to be tortured to death, Zhou Huaiming said, "If you want to confess, just nod or raise your legs." After he finished speaking, he turned around to leave. Xiao Lanqing immediately struggled even harder when he heard that. After a few attempts, he finally managed to lift his legs, which were tied together. Hearing his subordinate's reply, Zhou Huaiming turned his head and said, "Remember, I don't have time to waste with you here. You only have one chance, or you'll be eaten by ants bit by bit." He waved his hand at his subordinates after stating his ultimatum. A few of his men immediately took a towel and some chilly water and went forward to drive the ants away. They simply cleaned his wound after that. After Xiao Lanqing recovered, they began to interrogate him. However, what he knew was really limited. He gave out a few names. 3 of Su Mingtang's men were hidden among the guards. 1 was the advisor of the county mayor, and the rest were Xiao Lanqing's subordinates, including Constable Li. After Zhou Huaiming memorized the name list, he had mixed feelings. He had thoroughly reviewed these people before but couldn't find any problems. If Xiao Lanqing had not confessed today, finding these people would have taken a lot of effort. After that, he quickly sent people over to arrest those people. Otherwise, the real danger would befall County Mayor Kong. Sure enough, when his men arrived, the advisor was about to escape after kidnapping County Mayor Kong, but he was eventually caught. As for Su Mingtang, he wasn't found even after 5 days. Later, when Zhou Huaiming went down the tunnel, he found out that there was a secret room in the tunnel with some simple daily necessities. He then knew that Su Mingtang had probably escaped long ago. Chapter 207, Giving Up After He Left. Zhouing turned around and went to the kitchen. At noon, she told Gu Chengrui not to make any more house calls in the afternoon. In the evening, Zhou Huaiming came over with County Mayor Kong for a free meal. After the two were sure that Manager Liu would come to pick them up later, they rushed to the carriage that took them to the village. Of course, on the way there, the couple also found out that Xiao Lanqing and the others had been cleaned up. The couple immediately heaved a sigh of relief, as it was tiring to be on guard against them every day. When they reached home, Zhouing had prepared some snacks and tea while Gu Chengrui invited the village chief and the patriarch over. When the patriarch and the village chief learned from Gu Chengrui that Zhou Huaiming had come for the water wheels drawing, they were somewhat reluctant. After all, this was a way to make a fortune. Now that it had been cut off, they were not happy to accept it. However, they also knew this wasn't a good year, and many families in the country may not make it to the next. In order to save thousands of families, they could only bear the pain and part with their treasures. Maybe they could even get some reward for the village. They knelt when meeting Zhou Huaiming and County Mayor Kong without needing Gu Chengrui to introduce them. They had already met them when the restaurant opened. "We commoners, Qian Pinggui, Gu Qingji, greet General Zhou and Lord Kong. Do get up, all of you. Are you the village chief and the head of the Gu clan?" Zhou Huaiming asked. "Yes, am the village chief." The village chief took a step forward. "I, Gu Qingji, am the Gu clan's patriarch." The patriarch took a step forward. "Have a seat." Zhou Huaiming pointed at the 2 seats that Zhouing had prepared. "Thank you, General." The two saluted again before they walked over and sat down. Zhou Huaiming asked them how many days it would take to make a water wheel and finally said, "I think Brother Gu has already told you what I want to say, so let me know what you think." The patriarch and village chief immediately sang a high tune when they heard this. "This is a good thing for the country and the people. We fully support it." "I won't say much then. The county will quickly promote water wheels, and you can continue making them, but the price must be lowered." The profit of each water wheel must not exceed 5 taels. As for the money you have received, the county will pay it back. You don't need to refund them. County Mayor Kong chimed in. So, we're making water wheels for the county? The village chief raised his head and asked the two officials. Yes, except for your current orders, the rest will be distributed throughout the county. Understood. What about the transportation? Since it's done by you, it's up to you to install it, Wang Yao continued. So, you can make the arrangements. The county won't interfere. Thank you, Lord Kong. The village chief heaved a sigh of relief. At least they could earn some money from the installation and transportation. After exchanging a few polite words, the group went to the workshop to get the blueprint. After Manager Liu and a few carpenters visited the water wheel, the group of people sent them out of the village. Sigh, we've only sold 8 units so far. If I had known that this day would come so quickly, we would have made a few more overnight. Second Uncle Gu grumbled glumly. You should be content that we can still continue to do this. The patriarch glared at him. I think it's a good thing. This way, the grain production of the entire north will increase, and our days will improve. Gu Qingrui replied. That's true. Based on this year's situation, if it doesn't rain, there will definitely be a reduction in production. If water can be supplied, at least we can have some harvest. The village chief nodded in agreement. Chapter 208 Borrowing Ice. No matter what the villagers presumed, the matter was settled. Although the profits were much lower, there was still work to do. So the villagers weren't too unhappy. In the end, Gu Chengrui told Father Gu and Second Uncle Gu about Xiao Lansheng's arrest. If they wanted to start a shipping business, they could start now. At least, no one would be targeting them. Zhouing took advantage of an opportunity while importing more soybeans and green beans over the next half-month. She took out 5,000 pounds of flour from her inner space and put them in the restaurant's warehouse. She also prepared 10,000 pounds of black, unrefined flour for the long-term workers in the manor and a boat of bran and tofu dregs for the cattle and sheep, which should be enough to feed them for half a year. At the same time, they planted sweet potatoes on 80% of the land around their house. In the future, if they wanted to promote the seeds, they would have a source. In the blink of an eye, it was the wheat harvest season. As expected, the wheat yield was reduced, but Zhouing didn't expect that 1 acre only produced about 70 pounds of wheat, and those without fertilizer only had enough to replant for the next season. This also made her deeply aware of the hard work of farmers. The price of food was considered cheap. After the wheat was harvested, the people continued to plant the autumn grain. The next step was to harvest the chili. Although the yield was much worse than expected, with 1 acre of land only producing 500 to 600 pounds, Zhouing collected them at the price of 5 coppers per pound. The income from 1 acre of land was equivalent to the income from 3 or 4 acres of wheat. So, someone ignored Zhou Ying's dissuasion and continued to plant nothing but chili. However, no matter what they planted, the following situation was not optimistic. Drought was everywhere because there had only been 1 rain after the new year. The water level in the river was also dropping quickly. If it weren't for the water wheels supporting them, no water could come in. When Zhouing saw this, she planted all the dry land with white sweet potatoes, and the edge of the field was full of chilies. Of course, she also left 10 acres of land for planting vegetables. At the same time, when the sweet potatoes and yams planted in the grassland were ripe, she dug up a large portion of them and put them in the warehouse. It was too hot today, and no one was in the restaurant during lunch. Zhouing made some ice with saltpeter and then put some clean, crushed ice in a piece of watermelon and half a cup of milk. She was eating it happily. Manager Liu rushed in and asked anxiously, "Miss Zhou, do you have any more ice?" After he finished speaking, he looked at the ice in her hand and was stunned for a moment. "What are you eating?" "I made my own ice dessert. Do you want a cup?" Zhouing asked after being surprised by his question. "Don't mind if I take one. The weather is so hot that I really want to dive into a pool." Manager Liu looked at the ice and finally couldn't help but nod. "Wait a moment. I'll make you another bowl." After Zhouing finished speaking, she went back to the kitchen. A moment later, she made a bowl and handed it to him. Manager Liu didn't hesitate and immediately picked up the spoon at the side. After taking a mouthful, he took a deep breath and said, "It's cool. From the inside out, too. You really know how to enjoy a good meal." His shoulders relaxed, and he also remembered the purpose of coming here. He hurriedly asked, "By the way, do you have more ice here? Can you give me some? It's such a hot day, and the chicken I just slaughtered in the morning already tastes terrible in the afternoon." "No, the ice in the ice house can't be taken out. Otherwise, the meat inside would be rotten too. But I can tell you how to create ice." "Create ice?" Manager Lu was stunned for a moment and looked at her with a surprised expression. "Hurry up and eat up. They'll teach you after you're done." Zhouing spoke as she lowered her head and began to eat. Otherwise, her ice dessert would melt. Manager Lu was curious, but he lowered his head and started eating. "What delicious food did you bring us?" Dr. Luo immediately put down his book and walked over when he saw her. "Cold noodles? Babe, you really know me too well. I was just thinking about this." Gu Shengru's eyes lit up when he saw the contents of the takeouts. A few of the apprentices immediately looked over when they heard this. Gu Qingxi ran over and asked, "Sister-in-law, is this a new way to eat noodles?" "Kinda. Hurry up, wash your hands, and take the chopsticks and bowls while at it. It won't be good if it gets warm." Zhouing put the takeout on the table and said, "Don't mind if we do," Dr. Luo said, and he was the first to run to the back. The others immediately followed. Chapter 2: Tin Drought worsening after the meal. Dr. Luo asked, "Zhou, do you sell these cold noodles? We might order them for lunch as it will save us the trouble of cooking." "I haven't decided yet, but I'll try to sell it in the next few days." "That's lovely. We will order them as long as you sell them. The weather is so hot that people don't have any appetite, so the number of people having stomach problems is rapidly increasing." Stomach problems? Food poisoning? Some had stomach aches after eating spoiled food, some had gastric problems, and some even had heat stroke. In short, this heat is killing them. Indeed, we must avoid the summer heat. It's so stuffy and hot. When Zhouing said this, she thought of green bean soup. It seemed that she had to prepare some every day. When the cold noodles and chilled jelly were launched at night, it was immediately a hit, especially with passers-by. Eating it with a few lamb skewers and the like was comfortable. Starting the next day, Zhouing asked Zhao Cheng to prepare a large pot of green bean soup daily, offering it for free. At the same time, they also introduced ice desserts. The business in the afternoon was getting much better, but most of their business came from the surrounding shops, mainly selling cold noodles and desserts. Only those in a better financial state would order a stir-fried dish or two. As for the ice desserts, the customers were mainly women and children. It wasn't selling like hotcakes, but the profit was decent. Another half a month passed, and the water wheel could no longer deliver water. The crops in the fields died, and the price of food rose. The morale of the people died along with the crops, especially the families in town who did not have any food in stock. Some of them could not even afford to eat. That night, Zhouing saw Gu Chengrue come to pick her up. Just as she was about to leave, she was stopped by Qiuyu, the oldest child beggar in their group. "Manager Zhou, can I talk to you about something?" "Oh, what's the matter?" Zhouing asked curiously. Although these little child beggars helped out in the restaurant, they often looked for Fangqing or Sun Hongliang. They had never looked for her, so it must be a big problem this time. Can we eat in the restaurant instead of getting paid? Because of the grain price? That's half the reason. The other reason is that recently, people have been stealing or snatching our food. We can't protect ourselves, so we thought of eating in the restaurant before going home." Stealing and snatching? Yes, the slums in the West are chaotic. Although we have a lot of people, I'm the oldest and am only 12. Zhouing hesitated for a moment before replying, "Why don't you all just move into our restaurant? It's hot now, so why not sleep here?" "Really? We can move in here." "Of course, but you must pay attention to hygiene. You must bathe every day," Zhouing stated firmly. Of course, she could speak confidently because there was a deep well in the restaurant's courtyard. The water level had remained relatively high even after such a long time. Don't worry, Manager Zhou. We'll keep an eye on them. All right, they'll leave this matter to you. After that, Zhouing got on the carriage and went back. At night, after the two entered her interspace, Zhouing asked, Rue, what do you say we take in those child beggars? You want to take them all under our wing? Gu Chungrui was stunned for a moment. Yes, no matter what we do in the future, we must have someone under us, right? Now that they're in trouble, it's a good time to win them over. That's true. I'll ask them later. If they agree, we'll teach them. Chapter 211 Inquiry. The next morning, the couple came to town in a carriage. When they passed by the middle of the village, they smelled a strong aroma of food. They happened to meet Mrs. Bai, who was also smiling. Gu Chungrui couldn't help but ask curiously, Aunt Jiaxi, is there any good news in the village? Oh, Chungrui. Today is Chunhong's wedding. A groom is marrying into Widow Hua's family. We're all going to join the festival. Mrs. Bai paused for a moment before she smiled and replied, Marrying into? Yes, this year's year isn't good, and many families have too many children. They will marry off their children if they can't afford to raise them. At least they will survive, right? So that's how it is. Which village is the groom from? I heard he's from a town, but I don't know the details. Gu Chungrui nodded. Then you go ahead. We'll be going to town. After speaking, he whipped, and the horse carriage rushed to town. Chungrui, when you come back, remember to bring me some herbs for herbal tea, Mrs. Bai called out after remembering something. All right. Gu Chungrui turned around and replied, continuing to drive the carriage. Zhou, who was in the carriage, heard the news too. She didn't expect that the always proud and arrogant Chunhong would choose to get someone to marry into their family, but she didn't think about it anymore after a moment. When they arrived in town, Gu Chungrui saw that the little child beggars had already moved into the restaurant. He looked for Qiuyu, who was the oldest, and asked, Qiuyu, do you have any plans for the future? I don't understand what you mean, Qiuyu asked, confused. It's about what you want to do in the future. You can't be a shop assistant for the rest of your life, right? Qiuyu shook his head. We just want to eat and have a piece of cloth over us. We haven't thought about anything else, and that can wait until we grow up. Won't it be too late then? At your age, you should be learning a craft. It'll be a pity if you miss it. But I can't read, write, or draw? Qiuyu scratched his head and replied, What if we're willing to teach you? Qiuyu was dazed. He looked up at him in disbelief. Boss, what? What do you mean? You also know that our restaurant's business is doing well. We'll open more branch stores and other businesses in the future. So, we want to train a group of people who are loyal to us. I see that you have no one to rely on. So, what do you think? Qiuyu's eyes brightened up, and he replied, Can I learn to cook? Naturally, that's great. Then, I can make whatever I want to eat. Go to the kitchen, help out when you're free, and see who you click better with. It'll be best if you can find someone who takes a liking to you. I understand. Thank you, boss. Qiuyu immediately kneeled and kowtowed. It all depends on your talent. There are just some who are born bad at cooking. Gu Chungrui helped him up. Yes, I will work hard. Ask your brothers and sisters later to see what they think. Let me know when I get back. All right, leave this to me. Gu Chungrui smiled and patted his small shoulder. He turned around and walked out after that. Once he left, the news quickly spread in the small restaurant. Sun Hongliang and the others naturally knew about it. Fong Qing immediately went to Qiuyu and asked, Did the owner ask you to sign a contract? No, he didn't. Qiuyu shook his head. I see. Fong Qing's eyes flashed with a thoughtful expression. Brother Fong, what's wrong? Qiuyu asked nervously. Chapter 212 Reward. No, there's no problem. Fong Qing shook his head and continued. It's the owner and his wife who are kind. Anyone else wouldn't have focused on teaching others who didn't have a slave contract. Qiuyu grew up in the town, so he understood what he meant. For example, if an apprentice wanted to learn a craft from their master, they would have to work for 1 or 2 years for the master to affirm their character and make sure that they liked the craft before they were accepted. However, It would take a few years for the apprentice to learn any essential skills after joining. Although he would earn a small income at this time, festival gifts for his master must not be lacking. Therefore, before finishing an apprenticeship, they were basically doing free work for their masters. The main issue was that the master might not even teach all of their craftsmanship. There was also a clear difference between long-term workers and servants. Although long-term workers had quite a lot of freedom, they did the most challenging work, except for those with skills. The key was that servants could command and manage long-term workers under normal circumstances. Therefore, in general, the treatment of long-term workers wasn't as good as that of servants. However, servants had their difficulties too. First, they were contract-bound. Second, their lives were no longer in their hands. Of course, this was also the main reason why they could gain the complete trust of their master. Thinking of this, he fell into deep thought. What was he going to do? On the other end, Sun Hongliang also found Zhou Ying and asked, "Mistress, do you really intend to teach those children?" "That's right. They need to survive, and we need people. We each take what we need." Zhou Ying nodded, then looked at him and said, "But I'll have to trouble you to help me inspect them. Let's see who we can use and who we can't, and what the useful ones are good at." "Understood. I will test them." "Please do so." After that, Manager Lu came in with Zhou Huaiming, and Zhou Ying immediately greeted them, saying, "Brother Zhou, Uncle Lu, you're here. Come in and have a seat. You're willing to spend so much money just to get the temperature down here? From the outside, it seems like there are two different worlds." Zhou Huaiming sat down and waved his fan. "That's because you're hot internally. Hurry up and sit down to rest. I'll go get you a glass of water." After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she went to the kitchen. She got them a bowl of cold water, took 2 small bowls, and made them each a bowl of ice cream with crushed peaches. "Is this the ice dessert Uncle Lu was talking about?" Zhou Huaiming looked at the ice cream and asked in surprise. "Yes, this is ice cream. Try it and see how it tastes." Zhou Ying sat down too. Zhou Huaiming and Manager Lu didn't hesitate and drank a sip of the cold water before slowly eating the ice cream. After a mouthful, Zhou Huaiming's eyes lit up. "Such softness. What is it made of?" "It's mainly cream. A cream made with egg white, white sugar, and milk." "I see. This is a must-have for summer. One mouthful can already reduce my heat and fill me up." Zhou Huaiming exclaimed as he buried his head in his food. After he was done, he finished the rest of the cold water and said, "Let's go to the backyard. I have something to tell you." "Sure." Zhou Ying responded and took them to the living room in the back courtyard. The child beggars who had been playing around immediately ran out. Zhou Ying asked them to sit down and said, "Brother Zhou, if you need anything, just tell me." Manager Lu did not take a seat. Instead, he went to the door to keep a lookout. "This time, I'm not asking you for something but to give you something." After Zhou Huai finished speaking, he passed her 20,000 taels of silver and continued, "This is the reward for the water wheel, given by the third prince. Because of the Gu clan's special status and the first prince's interference, the water wheel invention was rewarded to the Qin clan's head." Chapter 213 Imperial Decree, the First Prince? Why is he doing this? Zhou Ying looked at him in confusion. Cough. He was the one who brought up the evidence of the Gu family's crimes. The county governor and Elder Qiao were his people. What about Qiao Lansheng? He is from the fourth prince's mother's family, Minister Su's family. Su Mingtang, the seventh son of the Su family, leaked the news to the first prince about the water wheel. The two princes are sure amazing. Even biological brothers can be divided into two factions. Zhou Ying laughed. Zhou Huaiming heard the sarcasm in her words, but didn't know how to reply. He took out another 10,000 taels of silver and said, "This is the money for the ice-making method. There's not much skill involved in making ice, so I won't accept this reward." Zhou Ying quickly pushed it back. "But it's been helpful. Not only did it solve the ice problem in our restaurant, but also elsewhere. Moreover, in the capital and other prosperous places, we can earn a lot of money just by selling ice, so I can't take this recipe for free. If you don't think it's too little, please take it." Zhou Huaiming stuffed it into her hands after he finished speaking. "Thank you." When Zhou heard they would sell ice for money, she didn't hesitate anymore. You can continue with your day, as I still have to make a trip to the Qian clan's workshop. Zhou Huaiming stood up and said, May I know what reward the emperor has given the Qian clan? Zhou got up and asked curiously. Qian Jiaqiang will be promoted to a 9th-grade craftsman in the Ministry of Works. He will be responsible for the production and maintenance of the water wheel in our county. He will also be rewarded with 100 taels of silver. How petty. Ahem, you can't say this outside. Otherwise, if someone with ill intentions hears you, even the third prince won't be able to protect you. Zhou Huaiming coughed. I want. Zhou laughed dryly and nodded. After sending them out, she returned and kept the 30,000 taels of silver in her interspace before going to the kitchen to get busy. After leaving the restaurant, Zhou Huaiming went to the village to announce the imperial decree as an imperial envoy, shocking the villagers. When they heard the contents of the imperial decree, they immediately exploded, especially the people of the Gu clan. The drawing of the invention clearly belonged to Gu Chungrui and his wife. How could their reputation and rewards all fall to the Qian clan? How could they be willing to accept this? I can understand everyone's feelings. Their family has other arrangements, and this is the reward for the Qian clan. Besides, who in your Gu clan has the ability to build and repair water wheels? Zhou Huaiming asked loudly. Everyone immediately became listless when they heard this. Among the younger generation, only Qian Jiaqiang's woodworking skills were the best. The others weren't up to the task. All right, you're all dismissed. Qian Jiaqiang, remember to report to the county office tomorrow. Zhou Huaiming said to Qian Jiaqiang. Yes, this commoner will obey your orders. Not a commoner anymore. No matter what, you're an official now, so you'll have to change this form of address. The village chief corrected him. At the same time, the village chief was overjoyed. Even though Qian Jiaqiang was only a 9th-rank official, he was still a government officer. The Qian clan had finally found someone in the county government, which would be much more convenient for their future. But he didn't dare to laugh out to celebrate when he thought of the Gu family's situation. Because of General Zhou's words, it was not hard to know that the Gu clan hadn't gained anything this time. However, when he thought about the Gu family's current status, he understood why. At most, the two clans would develop together in the future. The patriarch, Father Gu, and second Uncle Gu more or less understood what was going on. When they saw Zhou Huaiming off, second Uncle Gu still asked unwillingly, General Zhou, is there someone who is purposefully pressing down our Gu family? Zhou Huaiming hesitated for a moment, but he remembered they were quite familiar with the capital power struggle. He nodded and whispered, the one who's against your reward is the first prince's people. However, the one who leaked the news was the fourth prince's mother from the Su family. At night, after Zhou Huaiming heard the report from Manager Liu and Sun Hongliang, he looked at Sun Hongliang and asked, what do you think of Zhou Ying and her husband? They are of good character. As long as their servants follow their rules, they're quite generous to them. Also, there's a couple in the restaurant with a child. Manager Zhou gave special permission for the child to go to school. She said that if the child can pass the exam 3 years later, she can give him his freedom. What if you were to follow them? Sun Hongliang was stunned for a moment, and then his face turned pale as he knelt. Young master, please let me know if I have done anything wrong. This little one will correct it immediately. What are you thinking? Didn't you just say that Zhou Ying and the others want to train some people? It's obvious that they have a long-term plan. Since she trusted you and asked you to help keep an eye on the beggars, I think it's better for you to go directly to her side. By then, she'll be able to trust and value you more. Who knows, you might even become their #1 aide in the future. However, it might not be as promising as the development prospects over here. Of course, I won't force you if you're not willing. Chapter 2:15 Choice. Sun Hongliang finally understood what was being implied. Zhou Huaiming wasn't unhappy with him, but was just letting him choose a new master. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. To be honest, both sides had advantages and disadvantages, depending on what kind of life he wanted. After hearing that, Manager Lu hoped he would choose Zhou Ying's side because life there was relatively more comfortable. With his help, Sun Hongliang's future days would be almost set. However, this matter concerned Sun Hongliang's future, so Manager Lu could not decide for him. After a while, Sun Hongliang raised his head and said, "General, I would like to go back and discuss it with my family." "That's fine. This is a major turning point in your life. You and your family should have a unified opinion." Zhou Huiming nodded in agreement. After the two left Zhou Weiming's study, Sun Hongliang immediately asked for Manager Liu's opinion. Manager Liu, on the other hand, did not respond directly. Instead, he analyzed the pros and cons for him. After Sun Hongliang heard this, he was slightly biased toward Zhouing because he didn't like the life of fighting and killing. In addition, after living a comfortable life for a few months, he suddenly dreamed of a relatively ordinary life. After returning, he didn't reveal his thoughts but asked for his family's opinion. Fortunately, they finally agreed for him to head over to Zhou Ying's side. The next morning, Sun Hongliang told his decisions to Zhou Huiming, and Zhou Huiming took him to Zhou Ying to complete the handover. Once everything was done, Zhou Huiming set off after another meal. Zhou Ying had handed over the matter of training the child beggars to Sun Hongliang and Gu Chungrui. Qiu Yu and the others also signed contracts to sell themselves as servants, with Sun Hongliang as an example. In the blink of an eye, it was already autumn, the season with the most rain, but there was still no rain. Refugees had begun to appear in the town, and the village had begun to form a patrol team because of the occasional thefts. Early in the morning, Zhou Ying and her husband were sleeping soundly when they suddenly heard a hurried knock on the door, followed by Zhuang's rabid dog. The two woke up one after another. Gu Chungrui heard the anxious voices outside and scrambled to his feet. "Babe, from the sound of it, something must have happened. You should get up quickly." Zhou Ying nodded unwillingly, then took some clothes and put them on. After Gu Chungrui put on his clothes, he immediately ran out and shouted, I'm coming. Don't worry, boss, something big has happened." Chang Shun immediately shouted anxiously when he heard his voice. When Gu Chungrui heard Chang Shun's voice, he was stunned for a moment. He had assumed that something had occurred in the village, but he had not anticipated that it would be from the manor. "What happened, Chang Shun?" he asked. "The manor was robbed last night, and we lost 5 sheep and 2 cows. 2 of the people on duty were injured, and the rest are all unconscious." Chang Shun replied with a perturbed expression. This was his mistake. If he were to pay for it, he would go bankrupt. "Wait a moment, and he'll get the carriage." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he informed Zhou Ying, took the first aid box, and put it on the carriage. He rushed to the manor with Chang Shun. After Zhou Ying heard the situation, she frowned. It seemed that someone was targeting them, and there were many of them. Just thinking of this gave her a headache. She got up and tidied up the house. She took some soy milk and steamed buns from the inner space and hurried to the manor after breakfast. When they arrived at the manor, the 3 unconscious people had already woken up while Gu Chungrui was bandaging the 2 injured people. "Uncle Chang, do you know who did it? Or did they leave any clues behind?" he asked Chang Shun. Chapter 216 Search. I don't know who did it, but they left footprints and carriage tracks. However, these tracks disappeared after they left the manor. Chang Shun led her to the back of the cow sheet. As expected, there were some messy footprints and the tracks of 5 small carts. Seeing this, Zhou Ying walked around the nearby area. After confirming that the robbers had left the manor, she chased after them. However, these tracks didn't disappear after they left the manor. Instead, they had put on shoe covers. This meant it was at least a 10-person coordinated attack. They followed the blurry mark all the way to the town and finally found the abandoned house where they had stood when they were watching the fireworks. The house had been renovated, and there were many people living in it. When Zhou Ying saw this, she and Chang Shun retreated to the side and asked the nearby residents. Only then did they know that a group of local ruffians had lived here before summer, and they often came out to rob others. Moreover, they had someone on their side in the local authorities. They were also fierce men, so the villagers didn't dare say anything. Many couldn't stand it and had already moved or sought refuge with relatives. When Chang Shun heard this, He knew that these people were not to be trifled with. He hurriedly asked Zhouing, "Mistress, what should we do? If we don't get rid of these people, I'm afraid our village will never have a peaceful day after this. We can't take them by force and need to plan it out. Let's go back to the manor and set up some traps. We'll talk about the rest later." "All right, then I'll go back first. Be careful." Chang Shun turned around and hurried back to the manor. Zhouing turned around and returned to the restaurant. When she saw the child beggars occupying themselves, she smiled with relief. At the same time, she quickly remembered the reason why they had moved here. It was because someone was always stealing their food. "Qiuyu." She called for Qiuyu. "I remember you saying that someone was always taking away your food. Do you know who they are and where they live?" "Yes, they're refugees. They live in that broken house in the southwest corner of the town." Qiuyu then asked curiously, "Mistress, why are you suddenly asking about this? Let's just let them be. They have more people than us, so let's not provoke them." "Do you know how many people they have?" "Mistress," Qiuyu urged, "don't worry. I won't act rashly. I don't know. They're always with 7 or 8 men when I see them." "All right, you can go." Zhouing entered her residence, and Gu Chungrui rushed over just as she sat down. Zhouing asked someone to cook him a bowl of noodles. After he finished eating, she asked, "How are their injuries?" "It's just an outside wound. They'll be fine after a few days of rest." "Uncle Chang also told me about that group of people," Gu Chungrui continued, "so don't worry about it. They'll think of a way to solve it." "How are you going to do it?" "They have people in positions of authority. We have to find sufficient evidence." "Don't worry. I won't mess around. Just take good care of the restaurant." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he turned around and left the restaurant. He found a person introduced by Qianzhuang. The person was Li Si, and Gu Chungrui asked him to help find out where the beef stall was in town. At noon, Li Si told him that Butcher Zhang had beef and sheep, but they were all sent to prominent families and unavailable for sale. After receiving the news, Gu Chungrui only mumbled a few words of pity and paid him 100 coppers. Afterward, he took out a large bag of laxatives that he had concocted and headed toward Butcher Zhang's house. Chapter 217 Framing 1. When he arrived, there was a group of people eating in the share house. Besides the blood on the ground, 3 carts of meat were in the shed. After Gu Chungrui confirmed that there were no dogs inside, he turned around and flipped over the wall. He sprinkled the laxative on all the meat evenly and massaged the meat along the horizontal strips so the medicine could quickly penetrate. This way, even washing would only remove a portion of it, and the remainder would be more than enough for those to suffer from diarrhea. But this was enough. He just wanted to see who the person behind these ruffians was. When the time came, he would skin them alive. Of course, if they were to eat it without thoroughly washing it, they could only blame their bad luck. After he was done, he quickly returned to the restaurant for lunch. "Babe," Gu Chungrui said after the meal, "they'll be sleeping at the clinic tonight. You don't have to go back." "All right. Bring some saltpeter with you when you leave." "No need. There's still some there." Gu Chungrui returned to the clinic in a good mood after that. Zhouing couldn't help but be curious. It seemed that he must have done something terrible. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to smile after losing so much livestock. However, she didn't ask. If it were necessary, he would definitely tell her. In the evening, Gu Chungrui finished his meal and helped the apprentice grind the medicine while waiting for his patients to come. Sure enough, just as the sky turned dark, a person dressed as a maidservant rushed in and shouted while panting, "Dr. Luo? Is Dr. Luo in? There's an emergency." "What's the matter, young lady?" "Dr. Luo has returned home today, and am on duty." Gu Chungrui stood up and said, "Then let's hurry up. Something has happened at Constable Tian's house. Many people have vomited and had diarrhea. They've all had food poisoning. Wait a moment, and I'll get the first aid kit." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he turned around and entered the clinic to get his first aid kit. He then followed her to the Tian family's house. When they arrived at the Tian family, they knew they ate hot pot mutton without cooking the meat thoroughly, so everyone was done in. Among them were the old grandpa and old lady of the Tian family, who had just come from the countryside to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival, as well as his two younger brothers and another large family. Tian Jingzhong, who had just put on his pants, had his eyes light up when he saw him. "Dr. Gu, you're here. Please take a look at my parents and children. They're about to collapse. Do you all have the same symptoms?" "Yeah, it's mainly diarrhea, but my parents and children are nauseated. Don't worry. I'll go over and take a look." Gu Chengrui walked into the house after he finished speaking. Chapter 218 Framing 2. But I've eaten crabs a lot in the past, and this has never happened. Father Tian was full of doubts, and he ran out in a hurry. "Can I see what you guys ate tonight?" Gu Chengrui looked at Tian Jingzhong and asked. "Bring Dr. Gu over." Tian Jingzhong turned his head and spoke to the maidservant. The maidservant responded and brought Gu Chengrui to the dining room. Other than crabs, there was nothing else out of the ordinary. After that, he checked them one by one, especially the hot pot soup base. He didn't want to cause trouble for the restaurant. Finally, he looked at the beef and mutton. He pointed to some loose meat strips and asked the maidservant, "Where did you buy this beef and this mutton? The meat doesn't look very fresh." "I don't know either." The servant shook her head. "It can't be. I heard that this was fresh meat that had just been slaughtered." Tian Jingzhong followed over and said. Gu Chengrui did not reply. Instead, he passed the meat to him for him to see. Tian Jingzhong could tell at a glance that the meat was much looser than normal. He gave it another careful sniff. He didn't know if it was a psychological reason, but he sensed that the meat didn't smell fresh, and his face immediately darkened. Seeing this, Gu Chengrui said, "To put it bluntly, it's just a case of food poisoning. They'll prescribe something, and everyone has to drink a bowl. Once the things in your stomach are cleared, you'll be fine. Then he'll have to trouble Brother Gu to give me a prescription." Gu Chengrui nodded and opened a prescription. He handed it to the maidservant and said, "Count how many people in the residence are sick. The adults can have one portion of each, and the children under 10 can have half." The servant took it and ran down with Tian Jingzhong's special permission. Gu Chengrui was about to take his leave. "Mr. Tian, do rest while I take my leave." "Oh, please stay. It won't be too late to leave after my family's condition has stabilized. It'll save us the trouble of going back and forth." "That's fine too." After that, Gu Chengrui went to the front yard to wait. About 2 hours later, their family's young and strong members had already recovered. 4 hours later, the elderly and children had also stabilized. Gu Chengrui once again took his leave. This time, Tian Jingzhong did not stop him. Instead, he gave him 5 taels of medical fees and personally sent him out. "I really have to thank you for today, Brother Gu." "You're welcome. This is what I should do." Gu Chengrui paused and continued, "By the way, remember to eat blander food during the next 2 days, especially for the elderly and children. It's to recover your stomach." Gu Chengrui cupped his hands and returned to the clinic. However, he quickly went to see another patient. Naturally, he once again questioned the beef and mutton. That night, 7 or 8 families in town, and even more across the county, became ill with food poisoning. Even the county governor's house, by Jinping, was in a mess for the whole night. However, other than the families that Gu Chengrui had visited personally, the other families suffered. They had to suffer for half a day just to determine the cause of the illness. Therefore, everyone who had been plagued by this immediately started investigating. The culprit was quickly identified because this group consisted of either wealthy merchants or people in positions of authority. Gu Chengrui didn't expect that the real culprit was the brother-in-law of the county governor, a good-for-nothing wealthy brat. The reason was simple. After being despised by his father, he wanted to take advantage of the drought to make money. So, he organized a group of ruffians to rob the various villages and exchange them for money. After that, he sent people to various villages to take in children and sell them. Some of the girls were even sold into brothels. Basically, he did a ton of terrible deeds. Furthermore, his operations had spread throughout the entire county. When Bai Jinping received the news, he fainted from anger. When his wife saw this, she said she would no longer care about her brother either. Chapter 219 Consequences. The final result was that he was sentenced to death and executed immediately. As for his subordinates, some were exiled, some were sent to the mines, and some were arranged to build roads. In short, none were allowed to go free. Later, Bai Jingping took the blame and wanted to resign, but County Mayor Kong did not accept it. Instead, he made him responsible for public security. Bai Jingping became ruthless after this incident and adopted a strict crackdown strategy. For example, if you stole a chicken, you would be fined 10 taels of silver, beaten 50 times, and paraded in the streets for 3 days. The entire county finally quieted down. At the same time, Zhouing took advantage of the Mid-Autumn Festival to make and sell a batch of mooncakes, earning nearly 2,000 silver. However, the following autumn harvest was miserable. Crops near the river could be harvested, but not those further away. Zhouing had grown 2 seasons' worth of white sweet potatoes, and the manor had also harvested nearly 100 acres of white sweet potatoes. As for the potato vines, they were all collected and turned into feed for the cattle and sheep. Fortunately, the taxes were waived after the autumn harvest, and the county organized many strong labor forces to repair all the riverbanks so that people could survive the winter. In the winter, all kinds of bean sprouts became the main dish because there were no radishes or cabbages. However, their price was high because of the limited number of beans. Seeing this, Zhouing took the opportunity to launch green garlic and yellow garlic, which made a lot of money again, but the business was still worse than last year. The only thing worth celebrating was that Tian Jiaowang and Chunyang had come together. For this reason, Zhouing bought a courtyard nearby and arranged for the couple, Qiuyu, and the others to live there. After that, the new year passed in a lukewarm manner. After the new year, there was heavy snow, which made people finally cheer. After the snow melted, the spring plowing began. That day, Gu Chengrui and Zhouing had just returned home when the patriarch and village chief came to find them. "Grandpa, village chief, uncle, what's the matter?" Gu Chengrui asked. "Yeah, we have some serious business to discuss with you guys," the patriarch said. "Then please come in. Since we have nothing to do today, and can cook a few dishes, and we'll have a drink." Gu Chengrui said, "Yes, you guys sit down first. The food will be ready in a while." Zhouing greeted them and turned around to the kitchen. She first made them a pot of tea before starting to cook. However, now was not the time to show off. Therefore, Zhouing only made 4 home-cooked dishes: twice-cooked pork, pan-pasted tofu, vinegar-fried bean sprouts, and fried peanuts. After serving it, she made zhajiamian for herself, took out a cucumber from her interspace, washed it, and ate it together with her noodles. On the other end, after the 3 of them had a drink, the village chief asked, "Chengrui, does your restaurant still accept chili this year?" "Yes, I was just about to tell you about this. We're planning to plant the seedlings now that the snow has melted. I wonder how many plants the village is deciding to plant?" Gu Chengrui asked. "I don't dare plant wheat this year, so I plan to plant a lot of chilies." The village chief said it with a heavy heart. "But there must be a limit. After all, grain is the foundation of our food. The price of grain outside has increased a lot." Gu Chengrui said, "Everyone knows that, but what can we grow now? We can only grow vegetables. We can only harvest and grow autumn grain after the rainy season. I do have something here. It's a plant we found in the mountains 2 years ago. Although it doesn't fill you like grain, it can be eaten as a staple. The key is that the tender leaves can also be eaten, which is very suitable for the current lack of food and vegetables." "What is it?" The village chief's eyes lit up. The patriarch immediately perked up his ears. He quickly remembered the grass-like thing they had planted in their backyard last year and asked, "Is it the one you planted in the backyard for 2 seasons last year?" Chapter 220 Promoting White Sweet Potato. Yes, that's it. It grows underground like a yam, and the yield is quite high. If we plant it, we won't have to worry about not having food to eat. Gu Chengrui stood up and said, "Wait a moment. They'll go get one for you to see," he said. Afterward, he went to the kitchen and asked Zhouing for a white potato. After washing it, he took a knife back to the central room and said, "It's this. You guys can try it." When the village chief saw the white lump in his hand, he exclaimed in surprise, "This is really big. How many can one plant bear?" 3 to 8 or 9. All of different sizes. So many? How high is the yield? The patriarch was shocked. According to what he said, that plant would probably bear 2 to 10 pounds of white sweet potatoes. It's quite a lot. When we planted it last spring, the yield per acre was just under 10,000 pounds. When we planted it again in summer, the water supply couldn't keep up, so the yield was less than 2,000 pounds. That's not a small amount. 1 acre of land can only produce 100 pounds of wheat. If this is successful, it will be much more meritorious than the water wheel. The village chief was overjoyed. "How many seeds do you have?" he asked. "I know how valuable it is, so I didn't dare waste a single one except for tasting. All in all, we have about 220,000 pounds. However, I can't give them all out. I still have to plant some in the manor. This plant is robust and tenacious. After the leaves grew out, they could grow roots by themselves. So, after planting it for about a month, you could cut the leaves and replant them again. But it could also be because of this that the yield of the second replant will be lower. That's still pretty good." After the village chief finished speaking, he quickly put it on the table and said, "Quick, cut it open and let us taste it." Gu Chengrue nodded and cut it open with a knife, letting them each eat a piece. To be honest, it's a bit bland, but there's no weird taste. "It's better than yam," the village chief said after he finished eating. "Indeed, but will there be any problems with eating this?" The patriarch nodded in agreement. "I tested it last year. Eating it on its own for long periods of time will cause symptoms such as bloating and acid reflux, but it is never poisonous. As long as we eat it with a reasonable amount of grain, it will become the main staple." Good. That's good enough. As for what you said, it's not worth mentioning compared to filling your stomach. The village chief said, "Indeed, we'll have acid reflux if we starve anyway. As for bloating, to be honest, it's nothing to us farmers. We just need to run 2 more laps in the fields. Then it's decided. This year, we'll plant 1 or 2 acres of these white potatoes for each family." No matter what, we won't let the villagers starve to death. As for what to plant for the rest, let them arrange it themselves. The village chief nodded. "Okay, I'll arrange for the seedlings to be grown in the next 2 days. Double the size of the chilies. If anyone else wants to grow them, they can come to us to get their seeds, just like last year." Yes. We can also plant some vegetables that grow quickly. With that income, we can buy some food to last for a while. After that, the 3 of them happily drank some alcohol and then left. In the inner space, Zhouing prepared the seeds of rapeseed, spinach, chrysanthemum, cucumber, and cumin. Of course, cumin was the most abundant. This way, she wouldn't have to buy them at a high price in the future. The next day, after Zhouing handed the seeds to the patriarch, she went to the manor after she finished her work in the restaurant. In addition to growing seedlings, she planned to plant sweet potatoes in the manor and the grassland. This way, the people and the livestock could eat their fill. Chapter 221. Happy news after the seedlings were planted. No one expected that the county would distribute some wheat seeds as assistance. However, there weren't many, only enough to plant half the land. But this was already enough to make the people happy. Therefore, just in case, the paddy fields near the river were all changed to dry land and planted with spring wheat. Zhouing didn't change her plan. She still intended to plant white sweet potatoes throughout the manor. A month later, people began to get their income back from the fields because the vegetables matured and smiles appeared on their faces again. One day, Zhouing returned to the village early because she was having her period, which was unpleasant. On the way, they just happened to meet Madame Chow walking outside, so she had to go up and greet her. "Grandma, are you taking a walk?" "Yeah. Are you not busy at the restaurant today?" Madame Chow greeted her back with a smile. "Not really. It's hot now, so there aren't many people eating hot pot." "I see. I have something to discuss with you. What's the matter? Just tell me, and I'll do my best if I can. It's not a big deal. I'm just here to inform you about your fourth sister-in-law, Guzikius, marriage. People will be coming for the engagement the day after tomorrow, so I hope you can take the time to come over and have a look. This is excellent news. What kind of family is the groom from? Your eldest uncle's sister-in-law, Chonjin, introduced him to me. He's a well-off small landlord. There are 2 brothers in the family, and they own more than 100 acres of land. She's marrying into the second son of this family. That's good enough. We'll definitely be there the day after tomorrow. All right, then you go ahead. Well, Madame Chow hadn't finished her words when she saw 2 carriages slowly enter the village. The 2 immediately stood to one side. After the carriage passed, Madame Chow said, I'm mostly sure that's your eldest sister-in-law that has returned. Big sister? Are you talking about Sister Z? Yes, I remember the coachman in front. He was the one who drove the carriage when we came back 2 years ago. Your memory's pretty good. I can't even remember it was him. You've been busy, after all. I've been wandering around the village every day when I'm free, so I naturally remember it clearly. When Madame Chow said this, she was a bit worried because their return was too low-key. However, she didn't care about that now. She shook her head and told Zhou Ying to come early the day after tomorrow, then went home. Zhou Ying didn't overthink, and when she got home, she went to her inner space to boil water with an electric kettle. She mixed it with mineral water and made herself a glass of milk. After drinking her fill, she laid on the heated bed for a nap. She fell asleep quickly and was woken up by Gu Chungrui after that. When she saw that the sky had completely darkened outside, she quickly got up and asked, When did you come back? It's been a while. Dinner is ready, so wash your hands and get up to eat. Thanks. Zhou Ying sat up and calmed herself down. She went to her interspace to relieve herself before coming out for dinner. After the meal, Zhou Ying told him about Gu Zikius' engagement. It's the day after tomorrow. Remember to make time to go over earlier so that they won't complain. All right. Should we prepare something? There's no need. She's getting engaged, not married. At most, we'll give them some peanuts and melon seeds. That's true. You just have to prepare as you see fit. After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he cleared the dishes and went to the kitchen to wash them. Gu Chungrui had just left when the curtain was lifted. Zhou Ying thought Gu Chungrui had returned, but it was Mrs. Wang and Gu Zi instead. Although Gu Zi was no longer haggard, her expression was dark, and her eyes were hollow. It seemed that something had happened again. Ani, sister, quickly come in and sit, Zhou Ying said after a brief moment of stunned silence. Chapter 222 Separation. Zhou Ying invited them to sit down and asked, What would you like to drink? I'll go prepare. Anything as you see fit. Well, have anything. Mrs. Wang replied absent-mindedly. Sure, please wait a moment. Zhou Ying turned around and went to the kitchen to prepare a pot of chrysanthemum tea for them. She also called for Gu Chungrui. After exchanging a few polite greetings, Gu Chungrui sat down and asked, How's Big Sister's health? Is she feeling better? Sorry for troubling you, but I'm fine now. Gu Zi nodded and replied expressionlessly. Seeing this, Mrs. Wang immediately wiped away her tears. Zhou Ying was shocked and quickly asked, Ani, why are you crying? Just tell us what you need. We'll definitely help you if we can. I'm crying about how I was blind back then to have found such a bastard for your sister, Mrs. Wang said as she burst into tears. Mother, this isn't your fault. This is just my fate. Gu Zi comforted her. Gu Chungrui was stunned. Did eldest brother-in-law do something wrong? He asked. You don't have a brother-in-law anymore. We're divorced. Gu Zi immediately turned her head and chided him. When Mrs. Wang heard this, she immediately patted her hand and said, How can you speak to Chungrui like that? You shouldn't take your anger out on him. I just don't want to talk about that bastard anymore. What about the child? Did you bring them back? Zhou Ying asked. I've brought them back. From now on, Huan Huan and Lele will live with me. I'm here to ask you to introduce me to a broker. I want to buy a house, 2 shops, and some land in town as soon as possible. But it's not a good year for running a business. You can buy a house, but I think you should wait a while to buy shops and land. Zhou advised. It hadn't rained since the last heavy snow, and the water level in the river is almost at the bottom. It was really not worth it to buy any land now. Yes. Please help me persuade your sister. I want her to build a house in the village so we can take care of her. Otherwise, I'm really worried about her living alone in town with 2 little girls. Mother, don't mention this again. I won't live in the village. Gu Zi frowned. Is it because of your dignity? Gu Chengrui asked. It doesn't look good. Gu Zi paused for a moment before she nodded. But can you avoid it for the rest of your life? That's right. You are divorced, but we look down on you just because of that. Why do you have to move out? Mrs. Wang asked in confusion. But we have another sister-in-law at home, and our second brother will be getting married in a month. I don't want to mess up his marriage. Didn't your father and brother say that if their family gives up on the marriage because of this, then it's fine if the marriage doesn't happen? Mrs. Wang said hurriedly. After that, she looked at Zhou and her husband and quickly gave them a look. She was asking them to help persuade Gu Zi. Sister, do you know about the elder sister of the Tian family next door? She's also divorced, and now she's living with her 2 daughters at her mother's old house. The villagers rarely gossip about them. Instead, they would claim that Brother Tian was caring and righteous in looking after them. These 2 years, through our untiring efforts, they've been living quite well. 2 days ago, someone even came to propose marriage. Zhou explained. That's right, Z. The people in our village are good people. Mrs. Wang echoed. Big sister, do you know what the situation was like when we first returned to the village? At that time, we were tied up and escorted back to the village. We were in a much worse state than you are now. In addition, we implicated the Gu clan. At that time, all of them were so pissed. But in the end, didn't we survive and integrate into the village? That's why the people in our village are quite kind. As long as you're not afraid and face it bravely, there's nothing that can't be solved. Gu Chengrui ended. Chapter 223, Buying a House. 1. However, Gu Zi did not listen to him at all. She only felt it was embarrassing that she had divorced and wanted to find a place to stay as soon as possible. I just want to hurry up and find a house. We need a place to stay, she insisted. Zhou saw that she was determined and did not try to persuade her anymore. Sure, let's buy you a house to live in first. As for the shop and the land, it's better to take your time. Seeing this, Mrs. Wang could only wipe her tears and knew she was out of options. All right, then he'll buy a house first. They'll come and find you tomorrow. Gu Zi nodded. After a few polite words, the mother and daughter left. After sending them off, Zhou and Gu Chengrui suddenly became silent. Gu Zi had changed so much that she must have been greatly affected. He just did not know what had happened to torture a woman to the point of paranoia. However, the two didn't have the habit of being nosy, so they quickly continued with their tasks. The next afternoon, Gu Zi came over with her eldest daughter, Huan. Sister-in-law, thank you for bringing us around. There's a carriage outside. No worries, it's just a small favor. Zhou informed Sun Lianghong about her going out, then turned around and got into the carriage with them. Zhou took the mother and daughter to the town's largest property agency. She greeted as she approached Manager Qian. Uncle Qian, business is here. Manager Zhou, please come in. Manager Qian, who was lying on the lounge chair with his eyes closed, immediately came up to them when he heard that there was business. Your life is sure to be one of leisure. Zhou then introduced them to each other. Manager Qian turned to Gu Zi and greeted her. Oh, it's Miss Gu. May I know what kind of house you want to buy? If he remembered correctly, she was married to a scholar. He was confused as to why she was buying a house here. A house that can sleep 5 or 6 people and is safe in its surroundings, Gu Zi stated after some thought. That means houses in the east and north sections. Wait a moment, and I'll take a look. Manager Qian picked up the book on the table and flipped through it. Based on his memory, he pointed out 2 houses and said, one is near the academy. It's a house returned by a scholar who passed the exam. There are 3 main rooms and 2 east and west side rooms. There is another house not far away, where a merchant once used it to house his mistress. There are 5 main rooms and 3 rooms in the east wing. Many merchants stay in the surrounding area, and every family has a guard. Mistress? Guzi's expression turned ugly. Manager Qian could tell she was disgusted by the word mistress. He coughed dryly and continued, although she's a mistress, she's more of a concubine. It's just that she seems to have a bad relationship with the main family. He was interrupted by Guzi halfway through his sentence. Is there anything else? These 2 are the most suitable for you, but there are also 2 bigger ones. One is a small courtyard with 2 entrances and a total of 11 rooms. It was owned by a wealthy family that moved away. The house was just renovated 5 or 6 years ago, and it's pretty new. There's another one in the southern area, similar to this one, but closer to the pier. Then let's take a look at the small courtyard with 2 entrances. Guzi spoke after thinking for a moment. Sure, please wait a moment. I'll get the keys. Manager Qian left for the keys and called his wife out. Zhouing said a few polite words to her, and then went to the small courtyard with Manager Qian. After entering, there was a row of 4 rooms before them. The main living room was near the second entrance of the courtyard, which was built with 2 side rooms. In addition, there were 2 smaller rooms, each in the east and west wings. There was also a small garden in the middle. The courtyard was square and clean, looking fresh and new as a bonus. Chapter 224 Buying a House 2. Guzi took a fancy to it at first glance, but she worried it was too expensive. She could only ask, how much is Manager Qian asking for this place? 300 taels. To be honest, this price is really not high. If it were in the past, it would not have been possible to get it without 500 taels. 300 taels. Guzi hesitated for a moment before she thought of the furniture in the house. What about the furniture inside? If you don't mind, you can have it. These are all items that come with the house. Guzi looked at Zhouing because she knew little about the housing market. Uncle Qian, it's not easy for anyone during this disaster. Can you help me lower the price? They'll treat you to a big meal later. Zhouing had no choice but to speak up. To be honest, I was really giving my lowest price because of our friendship. Think about it. This tile and brick house would cost about 150 taels of silver just to build it. In addition to the land, there is really no room for more discounts. Manager Qian shook his head without the slightest hesitation. Seeing this, Zhouing knew that there was no room for negotiation. She turned her head and looked at Guzi. Guzi hesitated for a moment and walked around the house again. After confirming that there was still water in the courtyard well, she finally nodded. I will go with this. Don't you want to look at the others? Zhouing asked. No, I'll take it. It's quiet here. Guzi shook her head. Soon after, Manager Qian went to find the owner, and the 2 sides quickly transferred the ownership. As for the broker's fee, it was paid by the seller. In the end, Zhouing treated them to a meal at the restaurant. However, after the meal, Guzi insisted on paying the bill before leaving. The following day, the couple first went to town to deal with their things, then prepared some dried fruits and candies before returning to the village. Coincidentally, they bumped into Guzi, who was moving out. The 2 went up to greet her, and then went their separate ways. When they arrived at the Gu family mansion, the couple heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that the groom's side of the family hadn't arrived. They passed the things they had prepared to Madame Chiao. Grandma, we're here. All right. Come, have a seat. Did I bother your business? Madame Chiao took the food with a smile and put it on the table. She called Guzichio over. These are some snacks that your 3rd brother prepared. Go and find a plate to put them on. When the groom's family comes later, make sure to treat him well. Thank you, 3rd brother and 3rd sister-in-law. Guzichio took the things and ran away while blushing. Oh, look at her. She's still blushing at this age. With a smile, Madame Chiao said. Grandma, Have you met the young man before? Zhouing asked. I have, and he's quite a spirited young man. He knows some martial arts, and you'll definitely like him. Just as she finished speaking, Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao rushed back, each of them carrying many things in their arms. Gu Qingxi followed behind with a large rooster in his hand. When he saw the couple, he immediately put down the chicken and ran in. Cheng Rui, sister-in-law, you're early. Did you go to town early in the morning? Yes, I bought some things for the banquet. At this point, Gu Qingxi pulled Gu Chengrui along and said, Brother, let's go and slaughter the chicken together. So you came to find me to work. Gu Chengrui glared at him, but he still got up and went out. Oh, right. Grandma, where's father and second uncle? Are they not at home? Zhouing asked. They went to the fields as it was time to prune the chili buds. They couldn't afford to hire workers, so the four of them went by themselves. Madame Chiao continued with a smile. It's all thanks to you for the past 2 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have enough to eat. Chapter 225 Engagement 1. You're too kind, Grandma. It's just a win-win situation. However, it seems things aren't looking good this year, and we'll have to find a way to store more food. That's true. We've dried the remaining rapeseed and cabbage left over from last season. Oh right, we are also planning to sun-dry some white potatoes. If you two don't have enough food to eat, just come and take some. We have plenty at home. Sure, I won't be polite when we really need it. Zhouing smiled and nodded. Gu Ziqiu quickly brought out a plate of dried fruits as the two chatted. Just then, Father Gu and the others returned home with the groom's family. Madame Chiao immediately got up and went out to welcome them with Zhou. As for Gu Ziqiu, she hid herself in the inner room. Soon, a woman dressed in gaudy clothes walked in with a smile. Behind her were a middle-aged couple, a young couple, and a young man. Zhouing didn't even need to guess to know that the young man was Gu Ziqiu's fiancé, Zhang Xiaoshan. He had thick eyebrows, big eyes, and looked quite decent. He wasn't short, but he was a little shy, as he blushed when meeting them for the first time. Zhouing followed Madame Chiao and politely greeted the other party. When Madame Chiao invited them into the house, Zhouing turned around and went to the kitchen. It just happened that Mrs. Yao had also finished making tea and went into the room with Mrs. Liu to receive the guests. Mrs. Sun asked Zhou with a curious look, what do you think of that Zhang Xiaoshan? Mrs. Gua, Gu Ziqiu, and Gu Chengrui, who were slaughtering the chicken, immediately looked over. He doesn't look bad but blushes a lot, Zhouing replied. Blushing? It seems that he's still an innocent young man. Not bad, Gu Chengrui quipped. Chengrui, what do you mean by innocent? Gu Qingxi asked in confusion. It means he's still a young man with no experience. Chengrui, don't lead Qingxi astray. He's still young, Mrs. Sun hurriedly reminded him. Annie Sun, what are you saying? Am I a bad person? Besides, he's studying medicine now, so there are some things that he has to be taught. He can't hide from it. I think it's better to know these things earlier on. If we tell him and let him understand these things now, he won't be so impulsive in the future. All right, then I'll leave you to teach him this. Help me look after him, Mrs. Sun said with a red face. What are you guys talking about? Gu Qingxi was confused by their conversation and asked curiously. It's about things between men and women. Gu Chengrui looked up and said with a faint smile. Gu Qingxi's face immediately turned red like a monkey's, but when he heard that, he just looked at his older brother blankly and did not know what to say. You're cute. I'll give you a biology class later. Gu Chengrui laughed. Ahem. Zhouing looked at Gu Ziqiu, who was also blushing like a monkey's butt. She coughed and quickly changed the topic. By the way, has second brother's marriage not been settled yet? No, he's stuck in limbo, unable to shoot for a high target and unwilling to settle with a lower-class girl. Even the matchmaker isn't willing to help him out now. Mrs. Gua shook her head. Maybe it's not fate yet, Mrs. Sun replied with a dry smile. After that, they saw Gu Chengzi's son, Gu Jiahao. He was a chubby little boy with the nickname Xiaojia, and he was stumbling around in the courtyard. Mrs. Sun turned her head to look at Zhouing and asked, "Look at Xiaojia. He can even walk now. When are you going to have a child?" "That's right. You two married just half a year later than the eldest son of our family. You two shouldn't be too far behind in bearing a child," Mrs. Gua echoed. "We're not in a hurry. Let's wait until this drought is over." Gu Chengrui paused for a moment before replying. He took a deep look at Zhouing. "Don't they want it?" "Of course they do, and they really want one." Chapter 226 Engagement 2. But their current bodies didn't allow them to have children. They had to wait for Zhou Ying's body to mature completely, as Gu Chengrui didn't want to ruin her body just for the sake of giving birth. Another thing was the problem with their environment. The weather was too abnormal, so who knows if there might be a chaotic future. It was dangerous to be pregnant or with a baby if disaster struck. Besides, they were still young, so it was better to wait until their future was more stable. When Mrs. Sun and Mrs. Gua heard this, they didn't try to persuade them anymore and instead busied themselves with cooking. In truth, Mrs. Yao and Mrs. Liu had already prepared quite a lot of ingredients. A giant rooster that weighed about 5 pounds, 2 pounds of streaky pork, 2 pounds of mutton, and a large slab of tofu. Soon, the dishes were ready. Mrs. Gua saw the mutton pieces cut into pieces on the chopping board and looked at Zhouing, who was sitting by the fire. "You should cook this cumin mutton dish, Zhouing, because we usually cook it too gamey and dry." "No problem. You can leave it here while I prepare the seasoning." After Zhouing finished speaking, she got up and washed her hands. She then proceeds to marinate the mutton with a small amount of salt, scallions, and peanut oil. She then prepared cumin and chili powder. After the chicken and mushroom stew was out of the pot, Zhouing began to stir-fry the mutton. As soon as the fragrance wafted out, Gu Ziqiu ran in and said, "I knew it was third sister-in-law cooking. Otherwise, it wouldn't smell so good." Zhouing nodded. "It's good that you like it. Today is the day of your engagement. So do you want to cook a dish to show your skills?" "Okay, then I'll stir-fry the shiitake mushrooms and bok choy. I'm good at that." Gu Ziqiu hesitated for a moment and agreed with a blushing face. Besides, this was one of the reasons why her mother had asked her to come here. It was the custom here, and she could not avoid it. Zhouing nodded. After frying the cumin mutton dish, she divided it between 2 plates and brought them to the dining room. Seeing this, Madame Chow smiled. "It looks like we will be having a good meal today. Let the ladies deal with the rest while you should quickly sit down and eat." "All right." Zhouing responded and put a plate on each table for the men and women. Finally, she sat opposite Madame Chow, next to the matchmaker lady. As soon as she sat down, the matchmaker lady immediately sized her up and smiled. "You must be Manager Zhou from Grassland Taste Restaurant. I didn't expect you to look even prettier up close. I'll take it as you complimenting me. If there's a chance in the future, come to the restaurant for a visit." Zhouing smiled and nodded. "Oh, you and your lovely offer." "If there's a chance in the future, they'll definitely come for a drink," the matchmaker lady said with a smile. At the same time, she was a little curious about Zhouing. Whether it was the way she walked or the way she carried herself, she didn't act like a woman. Zhouing had the air of an inexperienced girl, and it was a little strange. But she couldn't care less about this and laughed it off. When Madame Chow heard Zhouing getting praised, she happily urged them, "Hurry up and move your chopsticks. The food won't be good if it gets cold. Especially this mutton. It will be a shame if it gets cold." "Yes, yes. The in-laws better try this mutton dish too. Shengru's wife rarely cooks now, even in her restaurant, so there aren't many opportunities to taste her cooking." Mrs. Yao smiled and echoed, "Well, we'd better try it out then." The groom's mother, Zhang Lishir, chuckled and couldn't wait to try it out. Even the smell of it had already attracted her. After a bite, the lingering fragrance was left on their lips and mouth. There was no gamey taste except for the umami of the mutton, and the meat was so tender that it was simply amazing. She couldn't help but eat 3 more mouthfuls in a go, and there were none left when she reached out to grab more of it. Chapter 227 Engagement 3. On the other side, the men's table was more reserved. Because the 3 men from the Zhang family had all eaten roasted lamb skewers at Grassland Taste Restaurant, they weren't that surprised by the deliciousness. However, they had their eyes on the seasoning of the meat. So after 3 cups of alcohol, Mr. Zhang asked, "In-law, I heard that there are a lot of spices in Shangha village." "That's right. Shengru's restaurant needs it, but it's too expensive to import from afar. Thus, they asked us to plant some in the village. It's a win-win situation." Father Gu nodded happily. In addition to planting 50 acres of spring wheat this year, their family had planted the most chilies and cumin in the village. The Gu family even planted 30 acres of cumin at once as more people were focused on planting chilies. As long as the water level could last until their crops ripened, they could still live in peace, even if there was no harvest for the year's second half. If you're interested, you can try it next year, but it'll depend on how much Qingrui needs, he continued. Gu Qingrui nodded. "We can't decide on this now as it depends on the weather conditions. If the weather returns to normal next year, they'll take in all the chilies even if you plant them all over this area." "Why do you sound like you want to open a few more restaurants?" Second Uncle Gu asked out of curiosity. "It depends on the situation. Even if we don't open more restaurants, we can still sell them through river transportation, right?" Of course, what he didn't say was that even if he couldn't sell them as raw chilies, he could make them into chili sauce, chili oil, and so on. In other words, it would not be a bad investment, no matter what. "That's nice. If you plan it again next year, remember to let us know, and we'll also give it a try." Father Zhang raised his glass and said, "No problem. If you want to plan it, we'll let Big Brother make the trip over." Gu Qingrui raised his glass and promised, "Leave this matter to me." Gu Qingji immediately echoed. He knew that Gu Qingrui was indirectly supporting his sister, so he had to support her too. The meal ended harmoniously, and Zhouing also knew that after this engagement, the betrothal gifts would be sent. The betrothal gifts were 20 taels of silver and a set of silver jewelry. The wedding date was set for April 28th, which was less than a month away. It was nearly half a month earlier than the patriarch's eldest son's wedding. After the meal, Zhouing and Gu Qingrui returned to town, using the excuse that they had work to do. Seeing that it was still early, the two carried 20 pounds of white noodles, 20 pounds of rice, 5 pounds of beef, and 2 slabs of cured meat, each weighing about 4 pounds, to Gu Zi's house. Gu Zi, who was about to leave with her servant maids, saw them entering with things in their hands. She was stunned for a moment before she smiled. "Thank you for remembering about my moving in. Hurry up and come in." After that, she quickly let the servant maids take the gifts, and then the 3 went to the main living room. Gu Qingrui sized up the courtyard on the way and said, "You sure have good taste. This courtyard is quite suitable in all aspects." "I think so too, and it's pretty quiet here." Gu Zi nodded. After they entered the living room, she invited them to sit. "There's a lot of space here, so you guys can come over whenever you're free." "Sure. If you need our help too, don't be shy." Gu Qingrui said. "All right, I won't be polite with you if I need help." "Oh right. Do you guys know where I can hire a female teacher in town?" Gu Zi asked. "Female teacher?" Gu Qingrui was surprised by the question. "I'm not sure about this, but I'll ask around later. But what kind of person are you looking for? Or rather, what kind of knowledge do you want the children to learn?" Chapter 228 A Hidden Problem. I would prefer a female teacher who specializes in training the girls of prominent families. I would want someone good at music, chess, calligraphy, painting, embroidery, and cooking. The main lesson would be teaching etiquette and virtue. Gu Zi replied. Gu Chungrui immediately understood what she meant. He nodded and said, "All right, I'll ask around later. However, if you want a live-in teacher, I'm afraid the cost will not be low. I know, but I can't delay my child's education. Just go ahead and find one." "All right," Gu Chungrui nodded. After that, the three exchanged a few more polite words, and Zhouing remembered that she had wanted to return home sooner. They didn't stay for long after that. On the way back, Zhouing said, "It seems that it was better for her to move out. At least she doesn't have to deal with the others. To save face, you have to suffer. The public safety in these ancient times can't be compared to that in our modern times. When people discover that she's living alone with her 2 children, she will know how much trouble she will be in then. Of course, it's fine if she wants to use force to solve these problems," Gu Chungrui said. Zhouing did not say anything after hearing that. She had lived alone for a few years, so she naturally understood the troubles of doing so. She only hoped Gu Zi could stay strong and establish a good family. Otherwise, she had to return to the village. Sure enough, something happened 5 days later. As Zhouing and Gu Chungrui prepared to head home for the evening, Gu Zi's old maid, Aunt Mei, hurried over. "Young master, madam, please save my madam. Tell me what's going on so I can make the arrangements," Gu Chungrui said. Aunt Mei looked around as she hesitated. Seeing this, Zhouing knew that she had some concerns. She turned around and said, "Follow me." Gu Chungrui had no choice but to tie the carriage to a crooked tree at the side and enter with them. Finally, the three entered a private room on the 2nd floor. After sitting down, Gu Chungrui said, "Aunt Mei, tell me what happened." This morning, a matchmaker brought a middle-aged man to the madam's house to propose marriage. After the madam rejected him, she thought that everything would be fine. Who knew that this man brought a few men to the door in the afternoon and forced madam to agree, or they would ruin madam's reputation? Ruin her reputation? Did he say what he was going to do? Gu Chungrui asked in confusion. Bai Jingping had been cracking down on anyone who was unruly. Who would dare to act up at this time? Were they not afraid of being caught? They weren't even being just unruly at this point. This was clearly a threat. He said that the madam was his escaped concubine. Aunt Mei stammered. His escaped concubine? "Anime, are you hiding something from us?" Zhouing asked after being dumbfounded by the answer. "I'm not," Aunt Mei said, shaking her head. However, her eyes were obviously avoiding her. She wasn't telling the truth. Seeing this, Zhouing said sternly, "Hu Zi is a girl of the Gu family. If something happens to her, we will not stand by and do nothing. But we will not rush up and help you if you are hiding something. Indeed, this matter doesn't seem right. You'd better hurry up and explain yourself. Otherwise, we really can't help you." Gu Chungrui echoed. He wasn't stupid, as her words were obviously full of loopholes. He couldn't just blindly follow them, or else the couple would be the ones who suffered. Seeing that they did not believe her, Aunt Mei became anxious. However, she also knew they weren't easy to fool, so she was so anxious that her forehead was covered in a cold sweat. When Zhouing saw this, she knew something was going on, and it wasn't a small matter. She continued persuading her, "Don't try to find excuses to lie to us. Just tell us the truth. Otherwise, how can we help you when we don't know anything?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.